It's time to let your sports opinions fly for the main event. A 7-team elimination match to decide the District 4 3A Championship. Presented to you live by PilotPointBearcats.com. This 10-week match has been sanctioned by the University of Interscholastic League. Our celebrity referee for the District 4 3A show is none other than the daytime psychology professor, Texas high school football storyteller, North Texas insider, and DFW Inside High School Sports, the most feared member of the Texas high school mafia, the one, the only, small-town Dixie, the professor,
Showtime! From the shadows of South Fork Ranch in beautiful Parker, Texas, I am the Professor Matt Diggs. Thank you for tuning in to episode 13 of the District 4 3A Report. And let me tell you, I have all my notes open. If you're one of those people who have Chrome and you have like all these tabs open at any given time because it like represents your to-do list, that's what I got going on right now. And there's about 20 tabs open, which lets you know we got a lot to talk about. So no time to sit and ramble too much, even though I will do that. Let's talk about last week's game. We'll start with the end of Pilot Point. This might be the last time we talk about Pilot Point on the District 4 3A Report. Remember, the District 4 3A Report is powered by PilotPointBearcats.com, but it is not associated with Pilot Point ISD. This week, Brock beat Pilot Point 76-0. And this is one of those 76s where Brock only had about 300 total yards in their 76 points because their defense was just so dominant. Brody Woods, 8 of 11, 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. Landon Gigliotta, 3 out of 4, 28 yards on his passing game. Brody didn't even really have to run the ball very much. He only ran the ball 17 times for 202 yards. We had a kickoff return for a touchdown in this game. Tyler Butler with the touchdown, with the kickoff return for a touchdown. And that is something you really got to keep an eye on as we go through this playoff route. We talk about how Brock is good for a turnover every single game. If they're good for a special team score every single game, that could be the antidote to the turnover every game, and we'll see what happens this week. But Brock with an absolutely dominant 76-0 result over Pilot Point. Pilot Point does not win a game this year and joins the Jerry Forrest. Jerry Forrest is the pigskin prep guy who provides the stats and the computer engine for Dave Campbell's Texas football. And every year he has his on pigskinprep.com. The teams that have not won a game and their extended losing streaks, and Pilot Point will now be on that list. Big game last week was Ponder versus Whitesboro. And Whitesboro with a amazingly powerful second quarter. They were down 8-0 going to the second quarter, but they put up 23 points in the second quarter, and they dominate Ponder, winning that game 47-14. And we're finally getting back the Whitesboro numbers that we're expecting. Max Parker, 12 carries, 192 yards with a touchdown. Clay Hermes, 9 of 14, 81 yards and a touchdown. Receiving, what can you say? Carter Sluter, another big day, Clay's favorite target. 3 receptions for 58 yards. And nobody this year, not even Brock, stopped Case Peacock. If he's not first team all wide receiver unanimously, I don't know what you're listening to on this district. Just an absolutely impressive year. I know Ponder is going to miss him, but we did get a little bit of a view of the future because we talked about all of the sophomores. Terrace Mill for Ponder, 5 receptions for 107 yards, including a 62-yard bombs. So we know that they're in good hands. But Case Peacock, thank you for your service to the District 4 3A report. It was a pleasure to watch you and cover you these years. You're a special kid, and you did great this season. Y'all were right there at the end of the day, but Whitesboro was just a little bit too much for Ponder, winning that game again, 47-14, and again doing it on the ground, going old school, just like we wanted to see. And this is the right time for Whitesboro to be getting a little bit of their identity back in tow. Another huge game, we had Boyd versus Peaster. And Boyd, man, what can you talk about with Braden McIntyre? Boyd went 1-9, and this quarterback balled out every single week, it seemed like, except against Brock and Paradise. But nobody balled out against Brock and Paradise except each other. But 26 of 40, 4 touchdowns, 275 yards. And we talked about Boyd. They had to find a replacement for the rushing game. This week kind of shows that the rushing game was still not there. Luke Brown, 10 carries for 26 yards. He was the leading rusher for Boyd. And Peaster defensively is just so tough. They had a hard time slowing down Braden McIntyre, which, when he's firing bombs like that, who can stop Braden McIntyre? But they just couldn't get the running game going, which means they couldn't sustain drives. And Peaster was able to sustain drives, winning 43-28. Ty Steedley, 6 of 9 for 98 yards. And rushing the ball, 8 rushes for 28 yards. Lafe Bringman, 17 carries for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was the answer that Boyd did not have an answer for. He was the question that Boyd did not have an answer for. And Peaster, just an absolutely dominant performance over Boyd, even though we got everything. Boyd left it on the table, and I think they can be proud of themselves. Even though they finished 1-9, a very respectable finish, and a great finish to the high school career of Braden McIntyre. He is a baseball player, so for those of you who are in the baseball district with Boyd, you will probably get to hear a little bit more about Braden McIntyre, a very special multi-sport athlete. But his high school football career is over again. And what a way to end it. 26 of 40, 275 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And again, you talk about first-team quarterbacks and this, that, and the other. And I get Brock and Paradise, but Braden is just right there. You can give one of them the offensive MVP, you can give the other one the regular MVP, and I like Braden McIntyre right there, right below those two, for that next position in line. Great year for Braden McIntyre. So that is what happened last week, which means we had all of the tiebreakers and all of the drama with that, which we really didn't have any drama this year. Brock ended 6-0. Paradise 5-1, Whitesboro 4-2, Peaster finishing 4th at 3-3, Ponder 2-4, Boyd at 1-5, and Pilot Point at 0-6, which means we actually had a clean district. And if you look at the Region 1, and we will look at the Region 1, this is the only district that was a clean district. And how I define a clean district is when Brock beats everybody below it, Paradise beats everybody below them, Whitesboro beats everybody below them, so on and so forth. You had no transitive kind of victories. But when you go up to Region 1, the rest of the region, it was crazy. District 1, we had a 3-way tie, 3 teams at 2-2 for second, third, and fourth. Bushland, or in District 2, we had a 3-way tie for second, third, and fourth. All of those going 2-2. We talked about all the scenarios in District 3 3A last week with Clyde, Jim Ned, Vernon, and Iowa Park. Clyde and Jim Ned 4-1 each, and Vernon and Iowa Park 3-2. So all 4 of those teams were beating up each other. And that Jim Ned versus Iowa Park game, I was reading the recap of that, and I cannot. To me, given the fact that if Iowa Park wins this game, they're the first seed. If they lose this game, they're facing Brock. And spoiler alert, they're facing Brock this week. And this game went to overtime, and Iowa Park dominated for a majority of the game. Jim Ned scored his first touchdown with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Iowa Park got stopped at the 5-yard line at one point, missed a field goal. And those facets, you put them all together, they finish in that 4th seed, and their reward is a game against Brock. this week. And we will talk about all of that, but let's kind of do a big picture of Region 1, because I hope, as your District 4 3A host, to be here over the next at least 4 more weeks, if not 5 more weeks. And I prefer to have the All District 4 3A championship again. It was fun with Whitesboro the last 2 years. Maybe Whitesboro gets back there. We saw Whitesboro kind of cresting a hill this past week, or maybe it'll be Paradise. But I'm going to rank the tops of the 16 teams that made the playoffs from 1 to 16, my bracketology, and then we'll kind of talk about things going from there. My number one team in Region 1 of District of 3A Division 1, got to go with Brock. They are by far number one. My number 2 team, I've got Paradise. Number 3, I've got Bushland. Number 4, I've got Jim Ned. Number 5, I've got Clyde. Number 6, I've got Vernon. Number 7, I've got Shallow Water. Shallow Water was part of that 3-way tie, but I think they were the better of those 3 teams, even though they're 5-5. Muleshoe was 8-2. Dalhart was 7-3. But Shallow Water, that's just a team that can really lay it in when they're playing good. Number 8, Iowa Park, kind of that tough luck. Number 4, Whitesboro, I've got them at number 9. Peaster, number 10. Muleshoe, number 11. Dalhart, number 12. Denver City, number 13. Brownfield, number 14. La Mesa, number 15. And Slayton, number 16. Now, I would not hate a world where we ranked, even if you rank them by record, and I understand why people don't want to do that, especially in some of these 4 and 5 team districts that lends people to make very easy non-district schedules. But at the point that you rank by schedule, then people aren't going to be giving you easy wins, because they're thinking, well, we need to play teams that we can win. So I think that'll kind of lead to a regression in the middle, where everybody's going to be playing like-minded teams, because you want to play a team that you have a chance to get a win over, if that's going to help your seeding. So if we had a world where we had bracketology, where we named the 1 seed and the 16th seed, we would have Brock versus Slayton, Paradise versus La Mesa, Bushland versus Brownfield, Jim Ned versus Denver City, Clyde versus Dalhart. That'd be the 5-12 game, the Clyde-Dalhart game, so who knows how that would go. Vernon versus Muleshoe, Shallow Water versus Peaster, and Iowa Park versus Whitesboro. If that were the case, I mean, there would be a really good chance that all 4 of the District 4 3A teams would advance into the second round of the playoffs, and at that point we would have probably a Brock versus Whitesboro second round game, if we then did the top seed against the bottom seed that was left. But the way we have it right now, District 1 and District 2 are not the necessarily the best, most well-rounded football games. So we would have 12 versus 13. We have Dalhart versus Denver City. 3 versus 14, Bushland versus Brownfield. 15 versus 11, La Mesa versus Muleshoe. 7 versus 16, Shallow Water versus Slayton. 5 versus 10, Clyde versus Peaster. 4 versus 9, Jim Ned versus Whitesboro. 2 versus 6, Paradise versus Vernon. So, I mean, you talk about what is your best game of the week. There you go. 2 versus 6, right there, Paradise versus Vernon. And then 1 versus 8 with Brock versus Iowa Park. So the way the playoffs are set up, obviously everybody's got to win the 6 games to get there. But some really good teams are going to find their way right out of the playoffs going forward. So let's talk about District 3 versus District 4 and how that's going to work out. I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I thought Clyde was a little bit overrated. I had some people coming at me when I was out and about at high school football games, and they're telling me, Diggs, Clyde is really going to be a problem for Brock. You got to keep an eye on Clyde. And I'm not saying Clyde is a bad team, but at that time, Clyde was undefeated, and I looked at them and I was like, Clyde is a good team. But, if you put Clyde in District 4 3A, they'd be right there with Whitesboro and Peaster. I mean, they're at that tier. They're not at the Brock and Paradise tier. They're winning games and doing well in a district where there is a lot of parity. I think Clyde, Jim Ned, Vernon, and Iowa Park in any given week are all within the touchdown of each other, which is why we had that set up last week where Iowa Park could have finished first or finished fourth, because, well, they are all that good. Even though Iowa Park was 4-6, once they got into district, they figured things out, and now they got to figure out how to beat Brock this week. So looking at the District 3A folks and looking at some of the players and stat lines, we'll start with Clyde. Clyde is basically a one-man show, and that one man is really good. The person you need to watch for Clyde is a man by the name of Blake Carr. Over the season, if Max Prep stats are correct, he threw for 2,051 yards and he ran for 1,352 yards, and he accounted for almost 80% of the offense of Clyde from A to B. And really, Clyde, if you look at who's next up, they have a couple of running backs who average about 50 yards a game in Fabian Gomez and Josh Hutton. But it's really the Blake Carr show. You have to stop Blake. If you can stop Blake, you can do pretty well against Clyde. And I think that's why I look at Clyde versus Brock in a hypothetical, Clyde versus Paradise in a hypothetical, and I think, you know what? I think because of the depth of the defensive line for both Brock and Paradise, they probably have a pretty good shot against Clyde to take care of business. Looking at Iowa Park, there's not full stats on Iowa Park, but the player that seems to be the player to watch is Parker Allen. And some of the partial stats that I've seen, he's basically a 50-50 guy. He'll run the ball and pass the ball. But again, with Iowa Park, he is the main event. He is the majority of the offense. He runs the ball. He throws the ball. He's their leading rusher, leading passer. He's probably their leading receiver as well. So if you can stop Parker Allen for Iowa Park, you generally have a pretty good chance to do well against Iowa Park. Moving over to Jim Ned. Jim Ned is a little bit more multiple than we've seen in the past. We know Jim Ned likes to run the ball, but they've passed the ball a little bit this season as well. And Dean Guffey is the player to watch. He is their quarterback. He threw the ball 85 times this year. So, again, that 9 to 10 passes a game, it's not something that they rely on, but, they do have it, and they are working on it. And I think if you're a rushing team, I've lamented for Louisville, for instance, a 6A team in DFW who's got the best offensive line and some of the best running backs in the area, but they pass it a lot. And I'm just like, line it up and run the ball. And I think you will find a lot of success. But you also have to pass the ball in certain situations as well. Obviously, when they know you're going to run the ball, you start to see that box. So it starts to get a lot of players in that box. And unless you have a really good offensive line, and sometimes you're good enough where you can have 11 in the box, and just have a free safety to play center field if needed, and you can still do good things. That's old school football right there. But Jim Ned has gotten better at making sure that you have to at least respect the passing game because of Dean Guffey. Rushing the ball, the name you need to watch out for if you're playing Jim Ned is a man by the name of Braden Shipman. 211 carries for 1,293 yards and 10 touchdowns this year. He is more than triple anybody else on the Jim Ned team. The next leading rusher is Aiden Ellis, who rushed the ball 79 times for 474 yards and 6 touchdowns. Shipman's highest touchdown this year is a 61-yard run. So he's able to get the ball, and he's able to do some good things for Jim Ned. And there's multiple players to go around. So, this is the first time when I look at who is the best team. Jim Ned may not have the best player like Iowa Park and Clyde does, but they have more well-rounded. So you have to pick your poison and who you want to take advantage of and what you're going to defend in any given scheme or setup. Whereas you kind of know who's going to get the ball with Iowa Park, and you kind of know who's going to get the ball for Clyde. Now, in doing my research for Vernon, I look up the Iowa Park versus Vernon game because Wichita Falls does stats for their teams. In Vernon, Cale Sherrill is the player to watch. In fact, in that Iowa Park Vernon game, he was an absolutely dominant force. He threw the ball only 3 times, 3 of 3 for 46 yards, and he ran the ball 9 times for 231 yards in leading Vernon to that 48-27 victory over Iowa Park earlier in the year, and that's the kind of the game you look at and you go, okay, Vernon's got a little bit of something. In that game, he had a 65-yard run, a 59-yard run, and a 74-yard run, all three for touchdowns before they kind of pulled off the gas when it comes to that. But then I'm looking at this past week, Vernon versus Bowie, and I don't see his name in the box score, which leads me to believe that potentially he got hurt somewhere along the way. Javon Fanner ended up rushing the ball. He rushed the ball 9 times for 131 yards in that game. Ty Scott, 4 of 6 for 121 yards. Doing my research on this, Cheryl is the son of the coach over there. So, I always consider when you have a coach's son on the field, it's basically like 12 against 11. So if you're in Whitesboro's district for the next 3 years, you're about to have 12 against 11 on the field because there's just something cerebral about a coach's son as quarterback that I think just brings a new dimension. I mean, to be the quarterback and to love being the quarterback and to thrive and be prepared for that position. I mean, you're probably 6, 7 years old sitting with your parents at the dinner table talking about plays and ideas and schemes and things like that. So when you have that love and you have that lineage where you're a son of a coach and you're a quarterback, I think it creates something. So this to me is a pretty big question about Vernon. We talked about this being the 2 versus 6 matchup. What is the status of Cheryl? If he's not playing, Vernon's not going to have much of a chance. But if he does play, I think that definitely creates an interesting dynamic. But can he run on that Paradise front seven? I think that will be the question. So looking at the games from top to bottom, Thursday night we have Denver City versus Dalhart. That's going to be at Lubbock's Lowry Stadium, 8 p.m. start. Paradise versus Vernon will be Thursday night at Wichita Falls Memorial. So Vernon winning the closer of the flips. Maybe Paradise picked Denton or something. Who knows when it comes to that? But they'll have to go up a little bit further, closer to Vernon land. Bushland versus Brownfield will be at Plainview. Jim Ned versus Whitesboro will be at Burleson. And all of our Whitesboro fans, let's give a shout out to Kevin Ozzie, who's the athletic director over at Burleson. Obviously took good care of you guys, taking care of you at Elk Stadium. They have great hospitality. Love Kevin Ozzie. He's just an amazing athletic director. He was over at South Lake and then got out of the game for a little bit. He's like me. He does some travel hacking. So, we talk a little shop about what credit cards to open and where to transfer some of your points as well. So my guy Kevin, I work with him. Talk about travel hacking with him sometime if you're talking about renting a stadium, and he'll get a big smile on his face because he absolutely loves traveling just like I do. Clyde versus Peaster, that's going to be at Dublin. And now we're moving Jim Ned and Whitesboro on Friday night. Clyde versus Peaster is on Friday night. Shallow Water versus Slayton back at Lubbock on Friday night. Brock versus Iowa Park will be in Graham on Friday night. La Mesa versus Muleshoe at Littlefield, says at 8 p.m. It's a weird start time, but hey, what can you do? And that's the 8 games we're going to have. You got 3 games on Thursday, 5 games on Friday. And that's important to note, these 3 Thursday games: Denver City versus Dalhart, Paradise versus Vernon, and Bushland versus Brownfield, because there is a pretty predicted jet stream coming through, a little bit of meteorology talk, to where we're going to have a very big soaking rain pretty much across the whole North Texas area, including Wichita Falls, Thursday afternoon into Thursday evening. I think it starts at 2 o'clock or so and goes well into the evening. It's nothing that's going to be a lightning storm. We're not going to see any rain delays or anything. It's just going to be ugly football on Thursday night. Friday night looks pretty clear. So when I'm looking at the 3 games, Denver City versus Dalhart, Paradise versus Vernon, and Bushland versus Brownfield, probably going to be in some pretty heavy rain at times. The wet football, you could have turnovers make a difference. I think the most likely game of impact will be Paradise versus Vernon. We talked about 2 teams. If Vernon's quarterback is out, I think that's going to be a big issue, because you have somebody who hasn't really learned ball control coming in there and trying to deal with a wet ball. If Cheryl does play, I think that could give Vernon a little bit of an edge to get in there and compete with Paradise. But we know Paradise can run the ball, and we know Paradise can stop the run pretty well. So I think Paradise is going to be a pretty prohibitive favorite in that game. Even with the rain, I think the rain could give us a touchdown either way. It could benefit Paradise or benefit Vernon, but I don't think the spread is close enough to where if it did benefit Vernon, it's going to help them too much. Clyde versus Peaster. Again, I think Clyde is a little bit overrated, so I think this is definitely a closer game than a lot of people might think. I think Peaster just doesn't have that offense at the end of the day to go score for score with Clyde. I think Clyde's going to win a 21-14 kind of game. The Jim Ned Whitesboro game to me is the most fascinating game because Jim Ned got taken to the limit last week against Iowa Park. They shouldn't have won that game against Iowa Park. That was a 4-5 team at the time, Iowa Park, and they dominated Jim Ned for 46 minutes. And then we see Whitesboro. They got the running game going. We know Clay can sling the ball around. We know they got Carter Sluter, and they've got the receivers. This, to me, has a huge upset all over it because we know Jim Ned is dealing with some injuries. Whitesboro looks like they've got everybody in full force. But, man, I just can't pull the trigger on it. I think Jim Ned is going to win a one-score game against Whitesboro. I just worry about Whitesboro offensively being able to score enough. But if Jim Ned can't put the ball in the end zone, they couldn't put the ball in the end zone against Iowa Park. And you don't look at Iowa Park as a defensive powerhouse. They're giving up 28 points a game this year. And Jim Ned is averaging 28 points a game this year. So for them to be held to 14 and basically only getting 7 in regulation and then 7 in overtime, makes me a little bit worried about Jim Ned because I think Whitesboro is going to be able to score 21 or so against Jim Ned. So can Jim Ned? If Jim Ned's only at that 7-14 level, Whitesboro is going to win. That's how math and football work here. But if Jim Ned can get a little bit of more offensive consistency, I think Jim Ned's going to win a 28-21 kind of a game. But one thing Whitesboro does, and this could get could be an advantage, is they'll go for 2 at just about any time. I mean, if it's 28-27 in the fourth quarter and Whitesboro scores late, Cody's going for 2. I mean, that's just they're not taking it to overtime. They're going to win it right there, and they've got a 2-point conversion ready. So I think if the closer this game gets, the longer Jim Ned lets Whitesboro stay in it, the more my confidence level goes to Whitesboro. But Jim Ned has been a team that they pound the ball very well. And if they were a one-man show like Clyde and Vernon are and Iowa Park to a certain extent are, I might give the edge to Whitesboro. But there's just too many elements that you have to stop with Jim Ned and Whitesboro. I don't trust them defensively. I trust them more offensively, especially after this past week. I just don't trust them defensively, so I'm going to give Jim Ned the nod there. And finally, we got Brock versus Iowa Park. I'm sorry, Iowa Park. It's just not going to be your day. I don't think we're going to be seeing the 76-0 kind of scores that we've seen in district play, but I do think Brock will have a pretty fair day against Iowa Park. I'm thinking 49-7, 49-0 in that range. Brock should take care of business. So if everything happens the way I think it will, which who knows if I'll be right. I'll have next week we would have Dalhart versus Paradise. We would have Bushland versus Jim Ned. We'll have Clyde versus Shallow Water, and we will have Brock versus Muleshoe. And then the way I'm projecting it out from there, in the next round, we would have Paradise versus Bushland and Brock versus Clyde. And currently, I am projecting a Brock versus Paradise regional finals yet again for the District 4 3A report. And as long as they put that game on Thursday, District 4 3A report championship, I'm going to be there. And we've already kind of bantered about where that game may be. Maybe a Springtown kind of a game. We'll find out. So That is the bracketology of the of 4A or 3A Division 1 and District 4 3A and how we work into all of that. I think it's going to be another good year for District 4 3A. And Whitesboro is just one play away. They're one turnover away. They're one special teams play away from breaking through in that Jim Ned game, I think. There's just not that big of a difference between Jim Ned and Whitesboro. So I'm hoping we've got at least 3 teams coming back. And Peaster Clyde, I think that's going to show that Clyde is not going to be much competition. I don't even know if Clyde's going to get past shallow water. I'll have to do a little bit more research into that game. That's just how I currently project it with, I got Clyde at 5 and shallow water at 7. So I just used my projections to predict it out for the next week. And Brock 1, Paradise 2, I think that's the game we're going to see. But certainly Whitesboro getting into that next round. Whitesboro versus Bushland. I think Bushland would probably take care of White. That's a tough draw for Jim Ned and Whitesboro to get Bushland the next round. But stranger things have happened, and Whitesboro has made it through those gauntlets before. I think it was Muleshoe last year, if I remember right, where they took care of business in that game. You know, Chris Berman used to talk about doing the fastest 2 minutes of highlights. I feel like I rolled through that, and I looked down at my Audacity app where I take my podcast every week, and we're right at 30 minutes. So that was the fastest 30 minutes. I mean, we went through last week, we went through this week, we went through playoff projections, area rankings, all kinds of stuff when it comes to that. So thank you for tuning in to the District 4 3A report. Remember, for our friends at the PilotPointBearcats.com network, like, subscribe, comment. Maybe you should give us 2 now. You know, maybe now that we're in playoff football, you got to step up that game and get us to 2 of those 3. I'll take 1. We're not gonna complain too much. So for all of our friends across the District 4 3A, we are all now family. We're not competitors anymore. We're having a big group hug. Come on in here, Peaster. Come on in here, Paradise. You two, Whitesboro, Clyde, get on in here. Group hug. We're headed to the playoffs, and we're going to do this thing. All of our friends through across the District 4 3A report, it's been a great battle. Goodbye, Boyd. Goodbye, Ponder. Goodbye, Pilot Point. But hello to the playoffs. See you down the road.
And we fly just like birds of a feather. I won't tell no lie. All of the people around us, they say, can they be that close? Just let me state for the record, we're giving love in a family dose. We are family. Hey, I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing. Sing it to me. We are family. I got all my sisters with me. We are family. Get up, everybody, and sing. Living life is fun, and we just begun to get our share of this world's delight. High hopes we had for the future and our goals in sight. We know we don't get depressed. Here's what we call our golden rule. Have faith in you and the things you do. You won't go wrong. Oh no, this is our family jewel. We are family. Sing it to me. I got all my sisters with me. Sing it to me. We are family. I can hear you guys. Get up, everybody, and sing. Ooh, we have faith in you and the things you do.
Stick to what you know how to do best. That's talking to that and sign checks. Leave the wrestling to me, Daddy. Now, for you out there, Dusty Roads, it's only just begun. You see, in the eyes of some people around the world, some of the glitter, some of the sparkly stuff might have rubbed off Ric Flair. But I got news for you. See, I'm still wearing cashmere. I'm still walking around in alligators. Woo! I'm still looking at the diamonds on this big old Rolex. I'm still riding around that limousine. And I am still driving the women in this world completely out of their ever-loving, cotton-picking minds because I am still the world heavyweight wrestling champion. Do I make myself clear? Woo!
Nature Boy.